Hello everyone, Morris here, and today is an exciting day because it's the start of the Epic era, and with it we have quite a number of changes. So, well, here you can see that this is basically the TLDR is that Player 1 definitely got over-nerfed. And before I get into, how it is, let's just actually get into the patch notes and see what has changed. So the patch note is pretty long because there's the reward stuff as well and everything. But the main thing that I do want to talk about, right? So this is the Epic era patch note. The main thing do want to talk about is the changes with the they call it first mover advantage, they call it first player advantage, and they do acknowledge this fact, right? They hear the feedback, they kind of know that it is a problem, and so they've basically implemented these changes. Okay, so these are the four changes. First one is that player one no longer have the free keep, so that's a small but significant change, I feel. And then they buff player two as well. Player two will retain their first keep, first free keep, I would assume, until they use it. So I actually tried that out and I was like, huh, how come I can still have a free keep? But this is basically when you go second, you get a free keep, but then that doesn't expire. So that is definitely a buff to player two. And the most significant one, of course, is actually the third bullet point, which says on turn 5, player 1's energy will be reduced to 2, previously 3. So previously, player 1, when you get to round 3, so turn 5, then you can basically use 3 energy, burst through your opponent, especially 3 Topaz can just definitely KO an Axie from full health. But now they can't do it because they actually don't get to 3 energy like until round 4. So now actually player 2 kind of have the advantage because player 2 can actually get to 3 energy first. Having said that, I do feel like this is a good change. I like the direction that it's going because sometimes it just feels the game is going too fast. Whoever goes first, burst through the opponent first Axie, and then the game is kind of over. But now, like the game goes a bit slower, so at least there's more balance. Meaning, like, oh, you can decide to shield, decide to taunt, or something. Right? There's more to outplay the opponent in a way, like more chances to make adjustment. Whereas before, if you just don't have a good draw, even if you have very good draw as a player two, if the opponent just bursts through your Axie in round four, that's no round three, then there's really not much you can do. So at least now it makes the game a bit slower, so it's actually a good change. And finally, with I guess the change in energy, they also, well, on turn 5, player one's card draw will be reduced to 4, previously 5. I don't think that makes too much of a difference. Of course, it's also a nerf to player 1, but I think the main one definitely is the reducing energy. So I do feel like uh, with the third one, I think it's enough for the nerf, but together with the rest, that is where I think it was a bit of an over nerf. But before I actually get into the data, I do want to talk very quickly about the balance changes with the runes and charms as well. Not really that much. So last stand, which is actually a mystic rune, yeah, so they might actually change it again. I don't know. But basically, the bonus stats now reduced to 40% as opposed to 50. I don't think that makes too much of a difference. Of course, it changes the number a bit, but the main effect is still that the Axie can't be KO'd, so then they can actually use the powerful card next turn, and also reducing the damage as well. So meaning the opponent can't really get through that Axie, especially if it has a taunt. Then yeah, it's just basically wasting the opponent's energy, or yeah, and being able to actually deal massive damage after that. I think that is still a very strong rune. And I feel like even if it's like plus 0%, it might still see play. So that's just my take on it. So plus 40% is just, yeah, it's still pretty good. Okay, and then with the stamp, I think it's also a good change because the stamps has been pretty strong, and now especially the rocket one, I think the sun and the moon, yeah, don't really see that much play, but maybe occasionally. But now the penalty changed to 15% rather than 10%, so that means there's more penalty in terms of using the stamp, which I think is also a good change because before Topaz is like really problematic. Having said that, I don't know actually like this kind of change, is it the base power change or is it like the total card change? Because if it's a base power kind of thing, then doesn't really affect Topaz and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that they um, actually apply to the whole like full effect as opposed to just the base power. But yeah, let's see. Okay, so that is basically the changes for the Epic era. So let's just go back to talking about the going first problem. So now, yeah, here is basically the data that I collected for the first few hours of the Epic era. And yeah, you can see basically all across the board. When I say across the board, means the top 100, top 200, top 500, top 1,000 players. It's basically the same thing that we see is that player one wins about 40% of the time and loses about 60% of the time, meaning going first now is a disadvantage. I would say it's still a, I guess, step forward from winning 70% of the time. So at least it's getting closer to 50%, but it's still not quite there. Well, basically the TLDR is that remember to click go second in the Epic era. And hopefully they'll actually kind of make more changes in the Mystic era to make it better. Having said that, I do feel like I do have a bit of comment, let's put it that way, about this approach for Sky Mavis' approach in balancing. It gives me some doubt into how much like, resources they have in terms of the internal game testing and allowing this kind of thing to happen. Of course, it is like still a relatively new and developing game, and so I can see that Sky Mavis' approach is always to not always, but like a lot of the times it's about throwing things out there and then let the community like test it out and see how it goes, and then listening to feedback, which of course is a valid approach for a developing game, and that's why you have like beta testings and alpha testing and things like that. I do hope that we'll get to a point where like the game is going to be more mature so that we won't have this happening again, especially it affects not just for casual player but a lot more for competitive player as well, because now a lot of games just decided on okay who goes first, and it's definitely not good for esports. So hopefully we'll move in a direction where there's just be more internal balancing like testing so that we won't like see this kind of changes where okay you change something and then suddenly okay like going first will win 70% of the time. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I want to say. So do remember to change your habit from the rare era, because the rare era I just auto click going first, and now remember to auto click going second in the epic era. Okay, so this is it for today. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.